Okay, so hello everybody. Here we are today for the day when the sun transitions from the days of the willow tree into the days of the ash tree. Today is the 11th of March 2025, and we're going to talk about the Grove card, the Spear of Lugh, which relates to the ash tree. But quickly, for people that are new to this, if you want basic lore of the ash tree, look on the YouTube channel for Ash Tree 2022. And if you want herbalism of the ash tree, we did that in 2023. And last year, we looked at gods and goddesses around the grove. And so the god that corresponds best with the ash tree is the Celtic god Lugh. And we talked about that in 2024. So this year, 2025, we're looking at Grove cards from the forthcoming Ogham Grove Oracle deck. So I've got a little PowerPoint presentation. It's only 4 slides just to talk about the Spear of Lugh and how that corresponds with the ash tree and the spring equinox. So this is a much more advanced, I suppose, or esoteric than Ogham for beginners. You know, we've already done 3 years around the Grove. This is our 4th year. So hence, look at 2022, 2023, 2024, and do a little bit of catch up on the ash tree. So I'll just bring up my PowerPoint. Okay, so I will explain some things basically, for not everybody is well read with Celtic mythology, of which the Ogham corresponds, because the Ogham is an Irish Celtic writing system and so on. So on the left-hand side here is the illustration for the Spear of Lugh. Lugh is spelled L-U-G-H. Lugh, sometimes it's just spelled L-U-G, like Lugh, but his name is pronounced Lugh, and he's a young mercurial god of light, a bit like the Archangel Michael, always triumphant over the forces of darkness. So the Spear of Lugh, in a way, you could see it as something like the Sword of Michael or something. You know, it's the weapon that overthrows the forces of darkness. But this is from Irish mythology. And what I want to talk about with this session too is treasures from the inner world and how you can work with that esoterically inside your own grove. So all mythologies in a way are alchemical or esoteric principles of things that can happen within you, within your own body, within your own psyche, and so on. You know, it's about connecting with your eternal self, and we do that through archetypes in mythology. It's all big stuff to talk about. So in Irish mythology, there are the gods and goddesses of Ireland, which are known as the Tuatha De Danann, the tribe of the gods and goddesses of the goddess Dana. Or you can just say Tuatha De, the tribe of the gods, sort of thing. And they had 4 magical treasures. And these evolve through the centuries into the Arthurian romances and become what is known as the Grail Hallows, the sacred objects of the Grail story, the Grail Hallows. But the older version is these 4 treasures of the Tuatha De Danann. And you have the Spear of Lugh. It's the first one. It's the first one we encounter in this year's journey. And it relates to spring equinox, which the ash tree is going to take us to. And there's logic to that, which I'll talk about further on. Just looking ahead, for the summer solstice, it's the sword of Nuada, sword of the king, sword of Nuada. And at autumn equinox, it's the cauldron of the Dagda. And so there's logic, and I'll explain it. There's logic for having the spear at the spring equinox, and there's star law and logic for having the sword at the summer solstice. And there's star law logic for having the cauldron at the autumn equinox, which leaves the fourth treasure, the stone of destiny, for the winter solstice. So there's not so much logic with the winter solstice, but it's the fourth treasure and it's the last station of the sun. But there is definitely logic for a spear with the ash tree. We looked in the first Akma, we're concluding the first Akma right now, that the older tree was the best tree used for making shields. That there's a kind of logic to woodwork, and different woods are useful for different things. Older is best for shields because it's waterproof. It never rots. It never goes damp. Venice was built on older trunks, you know, so you don't want a shield getting rotten and going damp on you. So just like clogs from Holland, the older wood is waterproof, so it was favored for making shields. Now the ash tree is the same in regards to spears. It was the favored wood for a spear across Europe, you know, and so it becomes the symbol, I guess, of the ash tree. And looking at other Irish mythology, the ash tree corresponds with kingship and a new king, so a young king, which is what's played with Lugh. So Lugh is a young hero who becomes king, but at the spring equinox, he's not yet king. He's just this super duper, brilliantly bright, clever, shining hero who can overcome all obstacles. You know, he's brilliant in that way. Eventually, he becomes the king of the Tuatha De Danann, but not at the beginning of the story. So the spear is the warrior's weapon, and spear is the hunter's weapon, you know, whereas a sword was much more aristocratic, very expensive. So it was a nobility thing. And so it relates to the king. And the king of the Tuatha at the beginning is Nuada. Anyway, on the right-hand side is an illustration that I'm colouring in at the moment for volume 6 of The Grove. And I intended to finish this last year, but I was too busy. I didn't get around to finishing it. But it represents Lugh and his relationship to the ash tree, because it's the tree of spears and the treasure is the spear of Lugh. And very quickly, if you know your star law, on the left-hand side of Lugh is a big dog, and that's Canis Major, the great hound. Lugh himself has his arm upraised like Orion the hunter. And in the distance behind Lugh is the white horse, which is the constellation of Pegasus. And in the Ogham, that corresponds very well with a horse, a magical horse called Enbar, which is the horse of Manannán mac Lir. And Manannán mac Lir lends his horse, the constellation Pegasus, to Lugh as his own horse. So, and Lugh also has this wonderful hound called Felinis as well. So it's Lugh and his dog and Enbar the horse and his spear upraised, but it's also a reference to constellations on either side of the spring equinox, and the ash tree is the spring equinox. So that when you get those things, the picture sings a bit more. It's a picture of symbolism. So here's the thing then, it's not unique to Celtic mythology. In Norse mythology, on the left-hand side here is a sacred site card I illustrated years ago, and it represents Yggdrasil. It's the ash tree, the great world tree from Norse mythology. And of course, that's famous for Odin hanging on the world tree, which is an ash tree, and importantly, speared by his own spear. It's part of the iconography of Odin on the world tree, is that he's wounded by his own spear. So that's interesting. That's another ash tree story that has the spear with it. And then on the right-hand side, this is what's known as a Saxon rood cross. Rood is spelled R-O-O-D, rood cross. And it depicts the crucifixion of Jesus. But of course, with the crucifixion of Jesus, he's on a tree. In the Bible, it's not called a crucifix. He is hung on a tree in the Bible. And he's pierced in the side by a spear. So that again is a sacrificial god on a tree being wounded by a spear, just like Odin. And the thing with Jesus being crucified, it's an Easter story, and Easter itself is a spring equinox story. So again, it's a tree, spring equinox, and a spear. Easter moves around because it's very fussy. It's always the Sunday after the full moon following the spring equinox. So this year, Easter is almost a month later than it was last year. But the point is, it's always based on the spring equinox, then the next full moon, and then the Sunday after, sort of thing. But it's a spring equinox lunar observation. But again, whether it's Jesus on the cross or Odin on the world tree, they're both pierced and wounded by a spear at the spring equinox time or relating to an ash tree. So the four treasures of Irish mythology, the spear, the sword, the cauldron, and the stone, find their way into medieval Grail romances of France mainly, but some of the Grail romances come from Germany, but mainly in the French area of Burgundy, really, on the French side of the Alps from Italy. That's where most of the medieval Grail romances come from. And the writers, if they're not anonymous, if they're a known writer like Chrétien de Troyes, wrote the very first story about the Grail, it's called Percival, they talk about there being an original history and that they themselves have turned it into romance, is usually the reference they use, that they've taken an old version of things and turned it into romance. That is, they've made it suitable for their mostly Catholic 12th century, 13th century audience. So what are pre-Christian pagan symbols, sacred objects, get very cleverly turned into Christian mysticism. Now, here's a thing then. So the spear of Lugh, the spear of the spring equinox, gets turned into a spear known as the Spear of Destiny, or known as the Spear of Longinus. Longinus is the name, apparently, of the Roman centurion who pierced Jesus in the side. So it's his spear, the spear that wounded Christ, if you like, But here's a thing, I'm not saying any of that's true, that it's just, I'm explaining the Grail romances. So it's not in the Bible, but somewhere along the lines, the Catholic Church decided that Jesus was born on the 25th of December. So that's not in the Bible, that's just later, it comes a few centuries later. But the 25th of December is a winter solstice moment. You have winter solstice, and then you get 3 days standstill, and that takes you to the 24th or 25th. So if the manger was there at night time under the star, he's born on the 25th. So it's roughly 3 days after the solstice. And the same for John the Baptist on the opposite time of year at the summer solstice. So 3 days after the summer solstice is the birthday of John the Baptist. So what you've got really going on, and it's not in the Bible, but the early church decided that Jesus was a winter solstice king and John the Baptist was a summer solstice king. So these are the Grail romances then. So for the winter king, Jesus, you have the spear that pierced him in the side, and you have the cup that caught his blood. So you have the spear and vessel, or spear and cauldron, you know. And then the opposite time of year for the summer solstice, with John the Baptist, you have the sword that decapitated him. And you have the dish that his decapitated head was put upon. So it's the same 4 treasures that the Celts already had: Spear of Lugh, Sword of Nuada, Cauldron of the Dagda, and the dish, the stone of destiny. Now, the different Grail romances, they change them around. They don't all say the same thing. So, for instance, the first Grail romance, the Grail is a big serving dish. It's like for a banquet where lots of people are going to help themselves to the buffet. It was a later writer called Robert de Boron who said it was the cup of the Last Supper. But there's also a Welsh version called Peredur. Peredur is the Welsh version of Percival. And the Grail in that story is a head on a dish. You know, it's a John the Baptist thing. And then there's a famous Grail romance by Wolfram von Eckenbach, the German writer, who says the Grail is a stone. You know, so lots of scholars argue about, you know, is it a stone? Is it a head on a platter? Is it the cup of the Last Supper? Is it a big serving bowl? And the answer is yes. It's all of those things, but depending on which mystery teaching you're looking at, you know, so that they're symbols from mystery school teachings. So for the spear, then, in the Grail romances, who's it? I think it's Sir Gawain gets to the table of the Grail, and there's nothing on the table, and he's just staring at this empty table with a white tablecloth on it. And as he's staring at it, 3 drops of blood appear on the center of the table. And then he looks up and there's a spear, and the spear is dripping blood. So it's the, you know, in that story, it's the blood of the wounded Christ dripping from the spear. But those 3 drops, you say 3 drops to any druid, you're going to think of 3 drops from the cauldron, or the 3 pips above the Arwen, or whatever, you know. So with the Spear of Lugh Grove card, I've put 3 hazelnuts falling down, because that's a reference to the hazelnuts of wisdom and the salmon of wisdom. The reason for that is the ash tree takes us to the spring equinox. And the spring equinox is a very magical moment when you go from the end of one zodiac year to the beginning of another. And we call that the salmon's leap, because the end of the zodiac year is Pisces, the fish. And Pisces, the fish, governs the feet. And then the very next moment, it's Aries, the ram, and Aries, the ram, governs the head. So in that one moment from going from Pisces into Aries, the spring equinox, there's a leap of energy from the feet to the pineal gland. We call that the salmon's leap. And I got to wondering, this is just my own thoughts. It's not in Celtic mythology anywhere. But I got to thinking about the spear being a kind of vertical axis. And if it's a vertical axis, like a vertical pole to the pole star, then it would connect all 3 cauldrons. So I got to thinking that the spinal cord in its own way is a bit like a vertical axis. And could the Spear of Lugh represent all 3 cauldrons aligned with your spine and everything, ideas of Qigong and Tai Chi and so on. But either way, energy jumping up from the lower cauldron, Pisces, to the upper cauldron, Aries, is the salmon's leap at the spring equinox, and the spring equinox is the Spear of Lugh. So I'll put the PowerPoint away and we can chat about those ideas and ideas of, there's many treasures in the other world, not just four. I'll talk about that a bit further on, but you can put your microphone on and we'll chat for half an hour or so.
On that last picture you're in, you have the three cauldrons, but you also have the three rays coming into the top cauldron. And on the front of each cauldron, you have three dots, and then you have dots all around. But that was intentional, I believe, correct?
Some things are intentional and some things are happy accidents.
I love it.
The happy accident with that is that bowl is actually an artifact from Glastonbury. There's an Iron Age lake village just outside of Glastonbury, and it's called the Glastonbury Iron Age Lake Village. There's a museum in town, and that thing is called the Glastonbury Bowl. It's about that big, and it's a proper Iron Age bowl, and it has those three balls on it. So
wow,
of course you can turn it around and not see those three balls, but I like them being in the middle. So then I just repeated it. So that's the happy accident. And then afterwards, maybe a year or two afterwards, I got to thinking that there was a triple goddess in each cauldron. And with the three cauldrons, you've got 9 maidens. So I do kind of see that as 9 maidens, 3 in each cauldron, but that is purely a happy accident. Yeah. The 3 rays of light in the upper cauldron, that's deliberate. But yeah, but the cauldron.
Or emboss or on one.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about the spear and the spine correspondence and the Kundalini rising at the spring equinox when the power of the sun really takes off. And from the feet to the head, the salmon's leap, it's all corresponding to that powerful possibility for all of us. I do feel very enlivened by spring equinox, and I'm excited that it's coming, and all the holidays around it are fine with me, and the more the merrier as far as any culture bringing forth that wonderful energy for all of us. And so that's something I hadn't remembered you say before, but wonderful about the spear. When we throw a spear or let loose an arrow, we are in total focus. That point of that spear is where our energy will create the most opportunity.
Yeah. Each of the 4 treasures has a magical ability, and the magical ability of the Spear of Lugh is that no army can stand against it. It's like end of, it's like it defeats all enemies. This thing, and there at the spring equinox, the months of darkness are defeated by the months of light, aren't they?
On that picture, when the spear's pointing, is it pointing to the liver?
On which picture?
You know the picture, the one that you saw, the spear. You pointed it earlier on. You said that's the spear
side
picture.
by side.
You know the one I mean? The spear, and you said it's collected in the
the Saxon Rood cross.
Yeah, it's pointing to the liver. So I was thinking this time of year you actually do a liver detox and you release all anger. So you're releasing anger and coming into the heart, the expansion of the heart, and then you can rise through the heart into the head. So maybe it's a spear pointing to, but also releasing anger from the liver.
Yeah.
I was just looking at where it was pointing. That just dawned on me as you showed me the picture.
So what on that Saxon Rood cross, I'll put it on the Facebook group, there's actually 2 sticks going up. And one stick is the spear doing the damage. The other stick has got the sponge with the vinegar on it. You know, Jesus was revived with the smell of vinegar, wasn't he, on a sponge? So that's happening at the same time in that icon.
Well, you've got there on the body. You've got the liver and the spleen. The spleen is meant to be where the sun comes in and transverses to the liver, but it gets blocked if you've got anger in your liver. So maybe the thing is they're spearing the liver to let the sunlight come through the spleen. Just as I looked at that picture, that's what I saw.
So just to open up the conversation a bit more then, so with doing the artwork for the Owen Grove Oracle deck, I used the 4 treasures of the Tuatha De Danann, but and they do nicely correspond with the 4 directions. And so for doing esoteric work in your grove, in your astral psychic grove, your inner grove, they're nice ideas. And you could do, so there's a famous poem credited to Taliesin, and the poem is called The Spoils of Annwn. And spoils means treasures, treasures that have been, you know, the spoils from your adventure. It's like Frodo finding a magic sword sort of thing, you know. So the spoils of Annwn. So you can go, Annwn just means your inner world, your world of dreams and visions. So you can make a deliberate journey into your inner world and bring back treasures.
Mm-hmm.
So you could just let that be utterly random and find whatever you find, like a magic harp or whatever. Or you could go specifically, I want to go and find the Spear of Lugh. And, you know, and what does that mean to you? If you achieve it, if you found the Spear of Lugh, how could you use that internally? You know, would you use it as your spinal cord for Kundalini rising, or would you use it as a power of light to overcome forces of darkness? Now, there are ideas like that. My point for opening this up is that there are in the Celtic stories many treasure lists, many more treasures than 4. You know, so in this, there's a legend of Lugh, and he has 9 special treasures found for him. There's a story of Merlin, and Merlin has the 13 treasures of the Isle of Britain, you know. And in for volume 6, I'm writing about Culhwch and Olwen, and there's a whole load of treasures in that story as well. So you could use the Spear of Lugh and the Sword of Nuada as maybe, you know, learning how to go treasure hunting in the inner world. And then you could look at the other stories that have longer lists of magical items, and they'd all be interesting, for want of a better expression, shamanic adventures, you know.
Could I ask you, Yuri,
yeah.
is one of the outer treasures the stone? Is it the stone at Tara?
Yes.
It is. I thought it was.
In Gaelic, it's known as the Lia Fail,
Yes.
and that translates as the Stone of Destiny.
Yes.
And the magical ability of it is that if the rightful king of Ireland stood on it, the stone would cry out in acknowledgement. Yes. It's almost like Arthur pulling the sword from the stone. Only he could do that. Only the stone would release the sword for Arthur, no one else. And equally in Ireland, the stone would cry out in approval if it was the rightful king.
Okay, thanks.
So that's at the Hill of Tara, yes.
Yeah.
Here's just a quick thing about the stone. I'm a member of the Grange here in the U.S., and it's a Masonic founded organization. And we have symbols of the year, and spring, summer, fall are goddesses. There's 3 goddesses, and then winter is an agate. It's a stone. And right. I'm thinking that it came possibly from some Masonic relationship to what we're talking about here with that Stone of Destiny being the winter solstice treasure. I'm going to see if I can find anything more about that. I'm practically the only Granger in the whole United States who's interested in these esoteric origins, but there might be something there.
Hey, Amy, I'll come to you in a second. Do you remember the rock birth thing on Hadrian's Wall of Mithras, and you've got the zodiac signs around him. Well, he's actually coming out of a stone, and they call it the rock birth, like he's being born from a stone or coming out of physical matter, and it actually corresponds with the winter solstice. So that's quite
Can I
interesting.
share something personal on that?
Rosemary,
Years ago, I was at a workshop with crystals, and she would give us, a group of us, a crystal to tune into. And when I held a piece of leopard skin jasper, it took me back into the earth, and it showed me that originally, when I was on a stone level, that I was leopard skin jasper, and it was an extraordinary experience. I became stone in the earth. Just amazing. So maybe this is where it comes from, Yuri, that we, on different levels, we do experience these different states of being, right back to stone.
Yeah.
Just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Amy?
Well, it was interesting because as I was thinking of this question, you were talking about it. It's not unusual. The sword and the stone, that whole image, can you expound on that a little bit? I mean, how does that fit into the four treasures, and where did that come from?
So not wanting to create any dogma, of course, I say that often, but
True.
just sharing symbolism, and then you use it in a way that makes sense to you, or, that we just sit around the campfire and share ideas. So back to that thing I mentioned on Hadrian's Wall, it's from the Mithraic mysteries, but it's 3rd century Britain. It's on Hadrian's Wall before King Arthur lived, before Merlin and Taliesin lived. This thing is there with all of its star lore and stuff. And what you have with that, the winter solstice area is at the bottom, and the figure is rising out of the Saturnalian winter solstice area. And he's holding a sword, and he's pointing his sword to the cusp between Gemini and Cancer the Crab. And that's precisely the summer solstice. So with that one figure, he's rising out of the stone, and he's holding a sword pointing to the summer solstice, or it's a figure holding a sword by a stone. That's stone and sword before, 800 years before any sword and stone stories written down about King Arthur. That this sword and stone stuff is there in that Mithraic iconography that the 5th century soldiers would have known about, because they inherited all of that from their grandfathers. So then, what you also have then with the Ogham Grove and with the way the four treasures are laid out, and it's not deliberate, it is star lore. The sword is at summer solstice, so the sword is directly opposite the stone. So that polarity of the evergreen pentagram and the rose family pentagram is also the sword and stone. And then the equinox is the polarity of the wand and the cup. The wand and the grail, or so however you want to see that. It's kind of male and female, isn't it? The baton and the bowl, it's there as well. So with the solstices, you've got sword and stone, and with the equinox, the spear and cauldron. Or with, the equinox is very medieval Grail, because it's the spear that wounds him and the cup that catches his blood. That's all on the equinox line there, aligned with the Easter celebration. So you can see how various things from ancient mystery schools and Celtic stories are finding their way into medieval Arthurian romances at a time when it was very, very dangerous to not be straight down the line Catholic. Like the Cathars in the south of France, you get burnt unless you're a straight down the line Catholic. So if you actually look at the Grail romances, they're like the X-Files. There's all sorts of paranormal stuff going on in them. They're amazing stories, but you could just shrug your shoulders and say to the Spanish Inquisition, it's just a story. You know, you're not going to get burnt at the stake for watching the X-Files, but you can talk about those unusual concepts. You know, why was Percival looking for the spear and the cup, and why was Gawain looking for the sword that decapitated John the Baptist, and why is the Welsh Grail a head swimming in blood? Does it mean the Welsh were Johannite, looking at John the Baptist more than Jesus? You know, so all those ideas are there. The Johannites believed in John the Baptist, and they believed Jesus was a usurper. They believed that it was John that gave Jesus the Holy Spirit in the River Jordan and all that sort of stuff, you know. So even in medieval Europe, there were lots of heretical ideas, or ideas that the Vatican considered heretical. And it carried on through to the modern day with the Da Vinci Code and everything, you know, or all those things just stayed under the surface, whispered from house to house. I'm not saying I believe any of them. I am a pagan, but I actually think a lot of medieval Christianity is based on pagan mysticism.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I've got an open mind with Gnostic Christianity. I think Gnostic Christians were working on their higher self and working on their visions and making their connections with their inner world and stuff. But I think that's very different to the church as a corporation of heaven and hell, you know. So I have too much sympathy for the Knights Templars and the Cathars and the witches that were burnt to be forgiving. I'm not forgiving, really.
But the Knights Templar were also burned, weren't they?
Yeah, they were, a lot of them. You know, in theory, quite a lot of them escaped. And in theory, quite a lot of them were bad. They got a bad reputation and a good reputation, you know. But if you've got 2,000 men, you know, 100 are going to be bad, aren't they? That's just a
problem.
Thing, you know.
I think it was interesting when you showed the picture of Odin.
Yeah.
You know, that the tree, it's called the Tree of Life, and it's ash. And ash, I said, there's an ash tree where the Thames comes out of the earth. There is I don't know if it's still there because it was in a pretty poor condition when I saw it last many years ago, but it's the Tree of Life, which is, I think, is really extraordinary. It just strikes me as being amazing that it's then brought into all these spiritual teachings as well.
Yeah, and you know, as you're talking, I'm remembering I used to do the runes when I was a teenager and stuff, so I was quite into Norse mythology back then. But I remember the world tree, Yggdrasil, holding all the worlds together. So like the lower, the middle, and the upper, it's like it's holding the three cauldrons together, just like the spinal cord. Really, it was really interesting. And of course,
that's where he drew up the runes from. All hanging there, 9 nights, 9 or something.
Yeah, 9.
And drawing up the words of wisdom, the runes.
And you've got the 3 Norns at the bottom, so like the triple goddess is there, you know.
There you go.
And in Ireland,
it's upside down and only had one eye.
Yeah, the island. The 3 ash trees that protected Ireland, there were 5 guardian trees. 3 of them were ash trees, and the 3 ash trees were all at Meath, which is the middle, the center of Ireland. You know, so it's the tree at the center again. You know, that's quite interesting.
Well, there's
a lot of commonality
in Gary's book, The Spine of Albion. He has it where if you squashed the outer circle, like the Hebrides and the whole of Great Britain, the centre of that would be Dunsop Bridge, Knoll Hill, and apparently there's meant to be an ash tree at the male centre. In this area, near Pendle Hill. The female centre doesn't really have a tree. That's St Mary's, but the male is meant to be in Gary's book. He put it down as there is an ash tree there. I've seen it, but that is meant to be the male centre, the one ash tree. But it is actually classed as the centre of Great Britain. Includes the Hebrides. The bit that doesn't include the Hebrides, the inner circle, would be Worley. But interesting, he's put the ash tree down as the centre of the whole of it together, the world ash tree. And apparently they used to go down there and do the parliaments and their acts and the legalities, according to the book. You'll know that. But yeah, they put the world tree there as well. Yeah, the ash tree again.
I thought with the iconography of Brigantia, which I turned into a drawing of Bridget, you've got the spear and shield, and it was my friend Alan Royce that told me years ago that the shield can be laid flat on the ground and it's a circle, and that you can put the spear at the center, and that's the vertical axis. You know, that the spear and shield are the grove and the center point to the center of the night sky, the pole star and everything, you know. So you could actually you could work in the center of your grove, and if you needed to, you could put your arm out and call the Spear of Lugh to you as a magical item. You know, that would be incredible self-empowerment for if you needed to overcome darkness in some way, you know, that's there inside of you. Or alternatively, Lugh himself is there with the ash tree to lend a helping hand. You know, there's lots of ways you could work with it, like the idea that with the 20 trees around you, you've got 20 gods and goddesses and all of their magical items there to help you out if needed.
I like the fact that in one of the drawings you had also the hazelnuts, as well, coming down. I thought that's what they were, and that's the wisdom, isn't it?
Yes, I turn the 3 drops of blood, which is actually important to the Glastonbury Zodiac, but we won't go there. But I turn the 3 drops of blood into 3 hazelnuts for the salmon of wisdom and the 3 drops of inspiration from Ceridwen's cauldron.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. It's fun to play with symbols, and then they can have multiple meanings, can't they?
On the one picture or drawing, 2 drawings, you have the Christ rood, and on the left you have your drawing, and she's got some curtains behind her, and she's got on the curtains is an upside down club.
Yeah.
A card of clubs.
You all take in so many little details. It's amazing. Yeah.
Here's one more strange one.
She's from the Well Maidens, and there's 4 queens, and they do loosely correspond with the 4 suits in the tarot. But instead of having wands and cups and swords, I used the playing cards, so they're hearts, diamonds, and clubs. So she's acknowledged as a queen of clubs. So that was just there as a tiny
but
detail.
Upside down.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is just a quick statement back to the heretics, the Templars.
Yeah.
You know, they were considered men of the sword, and they had a treasure, or treasures, and they also were guarding the rock, Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. So they're men coming out of the rock, just like the king coming out of the stone in later mythology. I mean, they might be part of this sequence. I'm just going to throw that out.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I can't remember what the objects are. I think they might be like religious icons or something. But there is a story that when the Knights Templar were suppressed, some of them escaped by ship to Britain, and they took with them the 4 treasures of the Templars. Whatever those 4 treasures were, I'm not sure. But apparently the treasures were kept at Montsegur in Cathar country, and they managed to get them to the British Isles, and then they helped Robert the Bruce defeat the English.
To Rosslyn Chapel. Perhaps they're buried in Rosslyn Chapel.
They're popular modern day ideas. Yeah.
Yeah.
They helped Robert the Bruce.
Yeah.
Wow. That's just,
It's not
quite a
definitely
time
true.
jump.
It is modern legend.
Yuri,
Eric.
on your drawing that has the shield with the spear in front of it, and the background on the bottom, it looks like a broom, a bit of broom tree.
Right.
What's that about, or did I miss that?
Which picture was it?
The one, it's the drawing that has the big yellow shield that looks like a sun, and then it has the white Spear of Lugh in front of it, and above is the birch, and below it looks like a broom.
Ah, yes,
broom
the main image.
And there's the three.
So around the golden sun behind the Spear of Lugh are 5 different types of foliage, and they all correspond with the pentagram from the spring equinox. So in the Ogham, there's 4 pentagrams, and they relate to winter solstice, spring equinox, summer solstice, autumn equinox. So for the Spear of Lugh, I've put the foliage of the 5 trees of the spring equinox pentagram. Yeah.
Perfect.
Wow, there's a lot to your work. It's amazing.
And in fairness, Eric, when I'm creating a drawing, I'm also just mixing things up, and I don't know what it's going to reveal. It's just me moving things around. We know about the evergreen pentagram and the rose family pentagram, winter and summer solstice, but I haven't really paid attention to the spring equinox and the autumn equinox. So when I was drawing the 4 treasures, I decided to do that, and something may or may not come out of it, but you just have to play with symbols. And like the 3 dots can be 3 hazelnuts, 3 drops of blood, or whatever it triggers in your own psyche is what's right for you. It means what it means to you. All visions do. No one can tell you your vision is wrong. So really what we're doing here is having a study group looking at symbolism and deciding what symbolism makes sense to you, and then that your inner world will then use your bank of symbols to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, you've got to have your bank of symbols, and then it will talk to you.
Like any good bard.
Yeah.
Thank you, Yuri.
It is a tricky slope. Franklin's not here today, but he would call it the perilous realm. And it is true, you can easily fall into self-delusion and madness and all the rest of it, but equally you have to trust your dreams and visions. And if your dreams and visions contradict something that was written down in the medieval days, like in the Mabinogion, it doesn't matter. It might not be exactly how it was explained in the 12th century. It's how your inner world is talking to you right now. That's what matters. But that's difficult because people, and I'm the same, people will cling to a medieval writing as some sort of gospel. But the other world is here and now. It's real right now, and it will talk to you in your dreams and visions. So I kind of see it as taking guidance and inspiration from the past, being as true to the past as you can be intellectually, but then be a free dreamer. Dream your dreams, No one
I've got some interesting ones.
No one can tell you your dreams are wrong. And there's self-empowerment in that, learning to trust your inner world.
Yeah, that's difficult for me.
Yeah, it's difficult, and also like your black dragon, the unknown is scary. The unseeable is scary. We're all frightened.
I think that's kind of a universal human thing.
Yeah.
The fear of the unknown, or just it's just kind of frightening for everyone, I think.
So all I would say with that is your dreams are just that. They're stories from the inner world. And the antidote to fear is peace. You know, so you just whatever
Courage.
system, yeah, be peaceful. If you're peaceful, you're not falling into fear. You're not spiraling into fear. You know, so being peaceful and then just trusting your inner world. You know, but we all have moments when we're energetically low, and you can spiral into depression, and then the fears will kick in. You know, so it's a balancing
Yeah,
act.
I've got some pretty heavy duty things going on with my sister, who's
Yeah.
very ill with cancer, and so it's easy for me to feel kind of depressed about stuff. I mean, I'm not a depressive type of person, but I'm finding more dreams that are more, you know, scary with you know, getting dragged into the underworld, or, you know, darkness type of things.
So this is why I said peace, and the logic is this, and I'm not making light of anyone who's had serious problems with depression.
Thanks for the email.
It can be a horrible, horrible thing. But if you're spiraling downward, no one can say, pick yourself up. It doesn't work that way. So if you're spiraling downward, you cannot suddenly spiral upward. It's not possible. So what you can do is, if you're spiraling downward, is you can stop. And if you can stop, then you can change the wheels and start going upwards. So for me, from my perspective, peace is the stop. Peace isn't a happy ever after. It's just be still, be quiet, just stop. And even if it just means 10 weeks under the duvet, you know, just be peaceful and stop spiraling downwards. So the peace is the antidote to fear.
Quietude.
Yeah, however you find peace, you know.
Yeah.
Could be meditation,
usually, I mean,
could be watching television, doesn't matter.
Yeah, different things, you know, going out into nature now that it's warming up and not so snowy and icy. I can get out more, you know, and spending time with my spouse and things that I love, that type of stuff.
Herbalism helps. And on that note, Eric's yapping.
That was a bird.
Yeah.
I was going to say it sounded like a parrot or something.
Is it a bird?
African grey.
I'll stop recording and we'll do our meditation. So,
okay.
Turn your microphones off.